A big thank you to mpb.com for sponsoring this week's video.
Morning everybody, and yes, I fully appreciate that it looks like I'm shooting in entirely the wrong direction here at Newborough Beach. Beautiful sunrise over there, and I'm shooting this way, but it's because of the amazing pastels. It looks wonderful. Now today I'm shooting with a couple of cameras that I don't typically shoot with, and I shall explain why just as soon as this light. That is beautiful. Completely forgot what I was saying, but yes, basically I'm shooting with two different cameras today that I don't usually shoot with. One is the Fujifilm X100V, and the other is my Sony A7C, which I've had a while, but I don't typically use for photography all that much because I'm normally using my A7R. This is really just my vlogging camera. Now the reason, in short, that I wanted to use these cameras this morning was because I'm on the hunt for a travel camera, which sounds a bit of a strange thing to say because all cameras really are capable of travel, but I'm after a camera that I can use for things like holidays, family days out, things of that nature, to just document what's going on. And I have a bit of a criteria for a camera like that, and these two, broadly speaking, fit the bill. Also, after my advice from a couple of weeks ago about a seat pad, I've still managed to get wet this morning, so this has been completely pointless. I don't really understand how that's happened, but never mind. Well, the good light didn't last long. I mean, it's still very pretty, but I thought it was going to glow for ages. The sun has hit a bank of cloud. Anyway, criteria for this travel camera that I'm after is relatively straightforward. I want it to be small, and this camera certainly fits the bill, this Fuji X100. I did see somebody online refer to it as pocketable, which I think is a bit of a stretch, really. Unless you've got pockets the size of buckets, I'm not sure you're going to fit this in a pocket. I mean, even in this jacket, sort of a bit of a squeeze, really. I mean, you stand a better chance in winter of getting it in a pocket than you do in summer, but yeah, I wouldn't call this pocketable. Still, it is small, much like my Sony A7C, which is a bit bigger overall than this because I've got a bigger lens on it. That said, on the subject of lenses, I want the lens on the camera, whichever camera it is, to be sharp. I mean, that goes without saying, really. I want it to be small, no bigger than this, really. This is a 40mm f2.5 from Sony. Fantastic little series of lenses, and yeah, I wouldn't want the lens to be any bigger than this. And I also want the lens to be moderately fast. I mean, it doesn't have to be f1.2, but I want it to be fast enough that it's capable of taking really nice portraits with shallow depth of field, and also capable of performing well in dimly lit restaurants or at night. Basically, situations where you want to take photos while you're traveling. Now, as I say, that is a relatively simple set of criteria, I think, but it vastly narrows down the camera market, and these two kind of stand out as possible contenders. It just so happens that I already own one of them. Other notable considerations: the Leica Q2, although it's very expensive for a camera that's just going to be used for documenting holidays, so that's out. Ricoh makes some fantastic cameras, but this seems to be the most popular choice for lots and lots of people. So yeah, basically what today is about is finding out whether it's worth me buying this, given that I already own the A7C. And I think it's quite interesting to find out just how different two cameras can be in 2022 when they're a relatively similar size, and for looks at least, they are completely different cameras. Now, I suppose in an ideal world, as far as travel cameras are concerned, we would have access to a zoom lens that was sharp, small, and relatively fast. But the laws of physics don't typically allow a fast, sharp zoom lens to be small. You can typically pick two of the three. You can't normally have all three. And what that means on these cameras is that in the case of the Sony, I'm using a prime lens, and in the case of the Fuji, it's got a fixed lens with a 35mm full frame equivalent focal length. And that's pretty good, I think, for a travel camera, because it's wide enough to be able to capture scenes like this, kind of vistas, but it's also not so wide that it's unusable for things like portraits or documentary stuff. And all in all, it's probably my second favourite focal length behind 50mm, but it's more versatile, I think, than 50mm. Now, I suppose I could get a 35mm lens for this Sony, but as I said, I love this little series. This 40mm, 50mm and 24mm, I think they are all exactly the same lens pretty much. And yeah, the 40mm is basically what I started my photography with. I had a Panasonic 20mm f1.7, It's a micro 4/3 lens, so 40mm full frame equivalent, and I loved it. I'm speaking in the past tense, I still have that lens, but yeah. 40mm, obviously not that different to 35, so kind of does the same job. The light is back. Don't know how long it'll last, so let's hurry up. I was here a couple of mornings ago, and the light then was phenomenal. And in fact, I've just put a print from that morning up on the store on my website, so get that plug in now. It's funny as well, just then when the sun came out, I was drawn immediately to the X100 as opposed to the A7C. Don't know what that means. Maybe it's just the novelty of a new camera, but it's interesting. It's not lost on me that this is kind of a niche test. I mean, there are lots of cameras in this category I could have compared, and in fact they're not even directly comparable. As I said, this is a fixed lens, this is interchangeable. But it is really interesting to see just how different two similarly sized cameras can be. I'd say first impressions, I mean not really first impressions, I've had this camera a while, but I've not used it much for photography. The A7C is more comfortable to hold, I would say. It's got a bigger grip, so that probably stands to reason. In every other way though, I think the ergonomics of the X100 is better. And basically when it comes to the A7C, I think what they've done is they've taken a full frame sensor and said, right, how can we get the most amount of stuff in the smallest amount of space around that sensor that will form the basis of a relatively basic camera. Now, when I say relatively basic, it's got lots of features, but there are drawbacks to this camera, including the fact that the viewfinder is hilariously small. You basically need a magnifying glass to see what you're looking at. And also there's no front dial, which might not sound like a big deal if you're perhaps a beginner photographer, but if you ask any photographer across the world what dial is the most important dial to them, I'm pretty sure they will all say the front dial. Yeah, and this camera hasn't got one. Now, if you compare that to the Fuji's got a front dial, a back dial, dials on the top, a joystick on the back, big viewfinder, and it essentially feels like the Fuji has been built in an entirely different way. And it seems to me like Fujifilm with this camera basically looked at the ergonomics first and then worked out how to get the electronics in the camera after that, which I think is the right way to do it. I don't know for sure that's what they've done. I've not spoken to anyone at Sony or Fuji, but just how it feels when you hold both cameras side by side. Oh! Turns out that rock is not as comfortable as my bed, and I know where I'd prefer to be at 6:45 in the morning. Oh! That's the great thing about flippy tilty screens like you get on the A7C actually. You can frame up in portrait mode, low to the ground, without breaking your back, which I very much appreciate. Now, in terms of image quality, for my purposes at least, neither of these cameras has a case to answer. Both of them are going to be more than enough for my needs. And really that's why I was talking about ergonomics earlier, because that is an awful lot more important to me as a consideration than image quality, because I think too many people buy cameras just based on specs. They'll read specs online, they'll listen to reviews about how many megapixels a camera has, and they'll buy a camera based on that, whereas in reality that has very little effect on how you actually use the camera day to day. And it's all well and good having a camera that's going to give you amazing image quality, but if you can't press the buttons fast enough to get an in-focus bird or whatever, and it's not much use. So yes, making sure a camera fits your hands and agrees with your workflow, I think is a much more important consideration. And so far, I'd say that goes to the Fuji. Although, if I was just shooting with the A7C, I wouldn't have really bruised my back, I suspect. And the shot probably wasn't even worth it. Well, I hate to say it, but golden hour has been pants this morning. The first 5 minutes was good, where the sun was bursting through, but after that, it's just been behind a cloud. Non-existent light. Never mind. Happens sometimes. Get rid of the rocks. Frame it so it's mostly the negative space of the sky. Nice. Try something different with the Sony. Maybe these rocks leading to the lighthouse. Not massively original, I don't think, but aim of the game isn't really originality today, it's working out what I think of these cameras. And I still don't know, to be honest. I do really like the look of this Fuji, I'll give it that. I used to take the mick out of people who bought cameras because of the way they look. I used to think that's ridiculous, it's just a tool. Like, it's there to take photos, why does it matter what it looks like? But now I'm starting to think, well, does that actually have an impact on the photos that you take? Like, if you're really enjoying taking photos with a camera, partly because of the way it looks and feels in your hands, then that might lead to you feeling more engaged, might lead to you staying somewhere for longer, might lead to you actually just taking more photos because you're really enjoying the process. How much is that worth? And is it a thing? Is that a real thing? I mean, on the basis of today, I've taken a lot more photos, I think, with this Fuji than I have my Sony. And is that because I like the look of it? I don't know. But I think there might be something in that, and I've just dismissed it in the past, perhaps wrongly. It'd be a brilliant dynamic range test if I was worried about image quality, but as I said, I'm not. But yes, that would work very well. Now, I'm conscious that at the top of this video, I was talking about a travel camera. And what I meant by that was, yes, things like landscapes, but also things like portraits, my food at restaurants, all the things that you might want to take photos of when you're traveling. And all I've done today, well, is take photos of landscapes. Now, I did take this camera away with me on holiday a few weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it. Found it fantastic for portraits. The face detect autofocus was fantastic, and I suspect, in fact I know, that the A7C would be much the same. Basically, on all my lenses, I've got this button on the lens set up for eye detect, so every time I press that, it finds an eye. So I know that both of these cameras are capable when it comes to portraits, as I know that they're both capable when it comes to landscapes. My primary mission today has been trying to work out what it feels like to hold each of them, basically. Because if you're anything like me and take most of your photos handheld, then how they feel in your hand really matters. But yeah, I appreciate it's probably a bit strange coming to a place like this to shoot exclusively landscape photos to try and work out if one of these cameras can do a whole lot more than that. But I know they can, and I'm not on holiday at the moment, so what are you going to do? Bit of ICM. I'm f/16. I've got the ND on, and that's given me about 1/4 of a second shutter speed. So with these waves, I think some of them will look quite nice. Here's one. Not catching them at the right time. Brake, brake, brake. Hopefully one or two of those will be interesting. We'll see. By the way, I'm a little bit annoyed at myself this morning. It's a few days after Easter, and I've come out without my egg. I've still got some of it left, and yeah, I just forgot to bring it this morning. And as is customary after Easter, I'm just craving chocolate. That's quite nice. Get a shot here.
I'll just snap the bunny's head off. I suppose I need a conclusion for this video, don't I? The Fujifilm X100V is a fantastically fun camera. The output is fantastic, absolutely on par with the A7C from what I found, and I just love using it, more so than the A7C. I do think though, that given that I already have the A7C, I should just get over the fact that the viewfinder is small, it doesn't have a joystick, and there's no front dial. I should learn to live with those things and just use that as a travel camera, given that I've already got it. Because I could buy this, but the cost of this is like 5 family days out or a holiday, which is exactly the point of wanting a camera for those sorts of things. So it doesn't make any sense to get a different one, I don't think. That said, if you're the owner of one of these cameras, I completely get it. I understand why so many people love it. Fantastically fun thing to use, and as I say, very impressive as well. Now, a big thank you to mpb.com who lent me this camera for this video from their extensive stock. Now, if you don't know, mpb.com is the place online for buying and selling used camera gear. And in fact, just this week, I sent a little Sony camera, an old GoPro and an old drone to mpb.com to sell. And the process is super simple. Basically, they arrange a courier to come and collect your gear. And then a day or two later, they send you an email to say that they've received your gear. And then a couple of days later, they send you another email to say that they've checked your gear and they ask you for your bank details and then they pay you. It's as simple as that. So yes, if you've got gear lying around that you haven't used for a while and you think you could put that money to better use than the money being the camera gear, then definitely check out mpb.com. And likewise, if you're in the market for something new, perhaps a new camera, new lens, whatever it is, definitely check out mpb.com as well, because you can save lots and lots of money versus buying something brand new. So yes, huge thank you to mpb.com. Links in my description for them, and massively appreciate the support. Also, one other thing before you go, Antarctica 2024. So Aurora Expeditions have been working really hard to go through all the inquiries that you've sent in for that trip, and we do appear to have some more spaces. So if you're interested in coming to Antarctica in 2024, then again, there's a link in my description to the inquiry page for that trip. But yes, thank you for watching, and until next time, I shall be trying to learn to love my Sony A7C a bit more, I think. Oh, do you like my lights on the shelves, by the way? Change colour. Watch this. Blue? It's a bit much, isn't it? Yeah, I'll see you next week.